in the shadows of the Cold War, when the world trembled on the precipice of nuclear annihilation, a different kind of warfare was being waged, not with bombs or bullets, but with the human mind itself. What if I told you that in the heart of Montreal, behind the respectable facade of one of Canada's most prestigious hospitals, doctors were systematically destroying human consciousness, that your own government, the very institution sworn to protect you, was complicit in experiments so barbaric they would make Nazi physicians blush? Allan Memorial Institute. The name sounds benign enough, but for hundreds of unsuspecting patients, it became a laboratory of horrors where memories were erased, identities shattered, and souls reduced to blank slates. Linda MacDonald was a young mother when she entered seeking help for anxiety. She emerged someone else entirely. In her own words, "I couldn't remember my children's names. I couldn't remember my own name. They had taken everything that made me. Tonight, we descend into the abyss of MK-Ultra, the CIA's mind control program that turned Canadian citizens into unwitting test subjects. We'll uncover how a respected psychiatrist became a puppet master of human consciousness, how millions in taxpayer money funded psychological torture, and why the truth remained buried for decades. This is the story they never wanted you to know, because some secrets are too dark to stay hidden forever. Chapter 1. Origins of a Nightmare. The year was 1953. The Cold War had descended like a steel curtain across the globe, and in the shadowy corridors of power, a new terror was taking hold. Not the fear of atomic annihilation, though that lingered, but something far more insidious. The fear that the human mind itself could be weaponized, twisted, and controlled. In the frozen hell of Korean prison camps, something extraordinary was happening. American soldiers, men who had sworn oaths to democracy and freedom, were standing before communist cameras confessing to war crimes they had never committed. They spoke of biological warfare, of capitalist atrocities, their voices hollow but strangely convincing. Most shocking of all, when the war ended, 21 American prisoners chose to stay behind with their Chinese captors rather than return home. The Pentagon was stunned. The CIA was terrified. How had the enemy achieved what seemed impossible? The complete transformation of the American fighting spirit. The answer, they believed, lay in a sinister technique the Chinese called Xinao, literally meaning wash brain. Western intelligence translated this as brainwashing, and the word sent shockwaves through Washington's corridors of power. For the American soldiers trapped in the Korean prison camps, brainwashing meant forced standing, deprivation of food and sleep, solitary confinement, and repeated exposure to communist propaganda. But it was more than physical torture. The Chinese had perfected something far more sophisticated, a systematic dismantling of individual identity, followed by careful reconstruction in service of communist ideology. They called it thought reform, and to American intelligence it represented an existential threat to the very concept of free will. At the helm of the CIA sat Allen Dulles, a man whose cold pragmatism would have impressed Machiavelli himself. Dulles understood that in this new kind of warfare, the traditional rules no longer applied. If the Soviets and Chinese had developed techniques to control minds, America needed to develop them faster and better. The stakes were nothing less than the future of human consciousness itself. The project was headed by Sidney Gottlieb, but began on the order of CIA Director Allen Dulles on April 13, 1953. The program was christened MK Ultra, a cryptonym that would become synonymous with the darkest chapter in American intelligence history. But this nightmare had deeper roots than most realized. The foundation for MK Ultra had been laid years earlier in the rubble of Nazi Germany. Paperclip was a program to recruit former Nazi scientists. Some of these scientists studied torture and brainwashing, and several had just been identified and prosecuted as war criminals during the Nuremberg trials. The moral irony was breathtaking. America would fight fascism by employing fascist methods. These Nazi scientists brought with them expertise in human experimentation that would have been unthinkable in peacetime. Their knowledge formed the backbone of earlier CIA projects. Project Chatter in 1947, Project Bluebird in 1950, and Project Artichoke in 1951. Each program pushed further into the forbidden territory of human manipulation, but none achieved the scope or horror of what was to come. MKUltra's mandate was ambitious to the point of megalomania. A declassified document from 1955 added that MKUltra sought to observe materials which will cause the victim to age faster, slower in maturity, and substances which will promote illogical thinking and impulsiveness to the point where the recipient would be discredited in public. They wanted to create truth serums, memory-erasing drugs, and compounds that could make enemy agents behave irrationally in public. The program's goals read like science fiction: drugs that could induce temporary or permanent amnesia, substances that would make subjects suggestible to orders, chemicals that could enhance or diminish human intelligence. They wanted to perfect the art of psychological torture while maintaining plausible deniability. But America faced a critical problem. The Soviet Union and China were closed societies where human experimentation could be conducted in secret. The United States, despite its democratic pretensions, needed a way to test these techniques on unwitting subjects. The solution would come from an unexpected source: America's northern neighbor. Canada, with its world-renowned medical institutions and less stringent oversight, presented the perfect opportunity. The country's prestigious hospitals and universities could provide the cover of legitimate research while giving the CIA access to human subjects. It was a partnership that would transform respected medical institutions into laboratories of horror. Harold Wolff, who wrote an early study of communist brainwashing techniques for Allen Dulles and later partnered with the CIA to develop a combination of drugs and sensory deprivation that could be used to erase the human mind. The academic world, driven by curiosity and funded by generous grants, would become complicit in experiments that violated every principle of medical ethics. The stage was set for one of the most chilling episodes in modern history. In Montreal, a respected psychiatrist named Ewen Cameron was about to embark on a journey that would transform him from healer to destroyer of human minds. The Allan Memorial Institute, nestled in the heart of one of Canada's most beautiful cities, would become ground zero for experiments that would shatter hundreds of lives. What began as Cold War paranoia about communist mind control would evolve into something far more sinister: the systematic destruction of human consciousness in the name of national security. The patients who entered those sterile hospital rooms seeking help for depression, anxiety, or simple marital problems had no idea they were about to become subjects in humanity's darkest experiment. The mind war had begun, and its first casualties would be the most vulnerable, those who had turned to medicine for healing, only to find themselves trapped in a nightmare from which some would never fully awaken. Chapter 2. Enter Canada. Dr. Donald Cameron. Picture, if you will, the epitome of medical respectability. A distinguished Scottish-American psychiatrist with silver hair and penetrating eyes, impeccably dressed in a three-piece suit, his voice carrying the authority of decades spent healing troubled minds. Dr. Donald Ewen Cameron was everything the medical establishment revered: brilliant, published, internationally recognized. He was president of the American Psychiatric Association, president of the World Psychiatric Association, and a founding member of the World Health Organization. His colleagues looked up to him. His patients trusted him implicitly. The world saw him as a beacon of psychiatric progress. They could not have been more wrong. Cameron's journey from healer to destroyer began in the most unlikely of places. A picturesque hillside in Montreal, where the Allan Memorial Institute stood like a monument to medical excellence. Nestled in a converted mansion that had once housed Montreal's social elite, the Institute commanded breathtaking views of the city below. Its Gothic revival architecture spoke of permanence and tradition, while its manicured gardens suggested the kind of peaceful, healing environment that wealthy families sought for their troubled loved ones. Cameron began the Allan Memorial Institute in 1943 with the help of a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation. From the beginning, he harbored grand ambitions that went far beyond conventional psychiatry. He gave numerous speeches on the problem of Germany and believed that the psychology and forces that gave rise to Nazism may have been long-standing in German culture. This obsession with the malleability of human consciousness would prove to be his fatal flaw. Cameron's reputation preceded him wherever he went. He was a man of impressive academic credentials, a graduate of the University of Glasgow who had studied under some of Europe's most distinguished psychiatrists. His early work on schizophrenia and depression had earned him international acclaim. By the 1950s, he was considered one of the most innovative minds in psychiatry, a pioneer who wasn't afraid to challenge conventional wisdom. But there was another side to Cameron that few suspected. Beneath the veneer of respectability lurked a man consumed by a dangerous combination of intellectual arrogance and moral blindness. He genuinely believed that human personality was nothing more than a collection of patterns that could be erased and rewritten like text on a blackboard. His patients weren't individuals with complex histories and emotions. They were experimental subjects whose minds could be deconstructed and rebuilt according to his specifications. He commuted from Lake Placid, New York, to Montreal every week to work at McGill's Allan Memorial Institute, a detail that speaks volumes about his detachment from the very patients whose lives he was about to shatter. This wasn't a dedicated physician living among his patients and understanding their daily struggles. This was a man who flew in to conduct his experiments and then returned to the comfort of his American retreat. The transformation of Cameron from respected physician to CIA collaborator began with a phone call in 1957. The voice on the other end belonged to officials from something called the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology, a distinguished-sounding organization based at Cornell University Medical School. They were interested in his research into what he called psychic driving, a technique that involved playing recorded messages to patients for hours, days, even weeks at a time. What Cameron didn't know, or perhaps didn't want to know, was that this prestigious-sounding society was a complete fabrication. This organization served as a front for CIA-funded research under Project MKULTRA, funneling grant money to behavioral scientists to finance research into interrogation, coercion, and torture methods. Early in 1957, Dr. D. Ewen Cameron, director of the Allan Memorial Institute in Montreal, formally applied for funding from the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology, a CIA front at Cornell University Medical School. The funding was generous, extraordinarily so. He was paid $69,000 from 1957 to 1964 to carry out MK-Ultra experiments at the Allan Memorial Institute. To put this in perspective, that amount would be worth over $600,000 in today's currency. For a psychiatrist in the 1950s, this represented a fortune that would allow him to pursue his most ambitious and controversial research without financial constraints. But the CIA wasn't the only source of funding. The federal government provided Cameron with more than $500,000 between 1950 and 1965, $4 million in today's dollars, along with a smaller amount of funding from the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, using a front organization called the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology. The Canadian government, it seemed, was as eager as the Americans to explore the dark frontiers of human consciousness. The irony is staggering. Here was a man who had dedicated his life to healing the human mind, now accepting vast sums of money to systematically destroy it. The same patients who walked through the doors of the Allan Memorial Institute, seeking relief from depression, anxiety, or marital problems, were about to become unwitting subjects in experiments that would make the Nazi medical experiments look restrained by comparison. However, a closer look into Cameron's research and project, MK-Ultra, shows that these experiments began long before Cameron was contacted by the CIA. Additionally, Cameron received funding for his experiments indirectly, so he was probably never aware the money was from the CIA. This raises a chilling question. If Cameron was willing to conduct these experiments before he knew about CIA involvement, what does that say about the man's fundamental character? The patients and their families remained blissfully unaware of what was happening behind the Institute's elegant facade. In many cases, patients and their families had no idea what was going on behind the walls of the Allan Memorial Institute. They trusted Cameron implicitly, believing they were receiving cutting-edge psychiatric treatment from one of the world's most respected physicians. "My mother thought Cameron was God. He could do no wrong," says Leslie Orlico. Then the researchers turned up that Cameron had been paid by the CIA for the mind control stuff, at which point my mother just freaked out and was demoralized for a long time. The transformation was complete. Dr. Donald Ewen Cameron, the man who had sworn to, first, do no harm, was now in the business of systematically destroying human minds for the sake of Cold War espionage. The Allan Memorial Institute, that bastion of medical excellence overlooking Montreal, had become a laboratory where the boundaries between healing and torture would be obliterated. The stage was set for some of the most horrific medical experiments in human history. In the sterile rooms of the Allan Memorial Institute, Cameron would perfect techniques that would make his patients forget their own names, their children's faces, and their very sense of self. The irony was lost on no one except Cameron himself. In his quest to understand and control the human mind, he had lost his own humanity entirely. What happened next would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives and cast a shadow over the medical profession that lingers to this day. The man who had promised to heal minds was about to embark on a systematic campaign to destroy them, one patient at a time.